All right, welcome back to part 2 of episode 4.
Beer?
Ver.
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 Beer.
Ver. So where we left off was talking about the last moment with your mom and what she said to you in response to, when she picked up the phone and finally decided to call you after 5 months, and what her response was to you.
Yeah, she called me and she said, I just wanted to say I'm sorry that I didn't call sooner. And then I was like, I don't know what you want me to say to that. Like,
Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to respond to that? And I didn't say it was okay. I just said, I don't know how am I supposed to respond to that? And she said, you don't have to respond. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. And I was like, okay. And then she was like, okay, I love you. I'll talk to you later, whatever. I don't know what she said. And I was like, all right, bye.
And I think that's so indicative of the relationship that you guys had, which you were talking about, is you always being the person that made everything okay. That was very similar in the relationship that you and I had. And actually a good detail about all of what has transpired between us is that your mom and I always had a really good relationship, and it was because we kind of resided in a similar space. Me much less than her as that like the victim space, but it's easy to be trapped inside of a victim mentality, especially if you have even an inkling of it and someone else is around you is projecting those victim thoughts or those victim emotions. It's easy for you to get caught up into that because you're like, oh yeah, I should feel like this. This is totally fine for me, instead of overcoming it or battling through it.
And so when my brother-in-law had that conversation with me, he actually made the point where he was like, he started out kind of apologizing for some of the ways he'd been. But in his apology is when he was like, this is what I don't like about you, and this is what I don't like about you, and this is what I don't like. And I'm like, maybe not the moment. But he did make the point where he was like, you never play the victim, so it's really easy to make you the villain. And he was the only person, as much as I disagree with plenty of his ways of doing things, I can at least appreciate that he is the only person really that has been that straightforward with me about stuff. And so he's the only person that was like, yeah, it's easy to dislike you because you never like cry for help or to pity or whatever, which is what people mostly do. And so it made a lot of sense too, because my youngest brother even said, Mom has always villainized you to me. And several people, yourself included, were like, yeah, she's always tried to make you the bad guy in things.
Right.
And so it was throughout this very, very condensed, because all of this is happening in a very short span of time. Within like 2 days, 3 days, all of this is happening. And so I was just like trying to dissociate, because that's what you do. But all of this trauma was coming up and surfacing that I had already dissociated from, that was like, no, not doing it this time.
Yeah.
And so it was like being forced, like my head was being held down, and it was like, bad dog, don't pee on the rug. And
you
like,
were being waterboarded with facing. I think to backtrack just a second too is an interesting detail about how the Bali trip even came about was when at the end of 2022 you came to me and we had a conversation, and you wrote you had been working for most of 2022 since we moved to Dallas, and you brought up how the kids were kind of raising themselves. I'm gone, you're gone, the kids are getting neglected. And you brought it up like once or twice, and then you said, like, we had an actual conversation, and you were like, I'm thinking about quitting my job. And I said, so quit your job. You know?
Actually, you had mentioned it to me sort of offhanded, and other times where because we keep in contact pretty frequently when you're away.
Yeah.
And so keep in touch about what's going on, the kids, all that stuff. And there were a couple of times I remember, like, I'm stuck in traffic, I'm rushing, I'm late for this, I'm missing that, whatever, trying to hurry up and get home or get to this event or just do all the things. And that's hard enough, but when you're doing it in a city where 12 miles takes you 45 minutes, it's like, even it feels like you're on that treadmill, that thing. What is that thing where it's like the scenery just keeps recycling and the guy's walking and it's like the same scene?
I don't know.
And I feel like it's like an old toy or something, like a wind-up thing. And it's like the guy's just walking, but the same scene just keeps going around. And that's what life felt like, where I was not getting anywhere. I was doing everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing, everything that was right. I was killing myself to do it. The kids were suffering from it, all of it. And so we would be on the phone sometimes. And I remember it was like twice you had mentioned it. And you're like, if you just want to go back to staying home with the kids, like, we'll figure everything out. And I, being me, was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And then this is over the span of a couple months. And then at the end of the year was when I was like, I can't do it. I'm wearing myself out.
Yeah. And with all of that is when I distinctly remember, just right after that is when it was the inception of all of this, because I remember you journaling, and I remember, like, we had a really good conversation one night where you called me, and I was headed back to camp, and I was actually, like, when I got back to camp is when the conversation really started to, like, pick up and go really quick, and you were just, like, unloading all this stuff. And I remember I was swinging in a hammock and I was just watching the stars, and you were telling me about all of this, like, you know, processed trauma basically that you had with your mom. You were like, I figured out, like, my core wound is my mom, and, like, all of these different things. And, like,
real quick, moving to Texas was the first time I'd lived away from my mom, because I'd always lived in close proximity to her, within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so moving to Texas was the first time that she was not, like, really close. And that was when I realized it, because we stopped communicating.
Yeah.
I didn't hear from her. In the 2 years that I lived there, she called me probably twice. One time on my birthday, and I think one time shortly after we moved, because we flew her out, remember, to stay with the kids that one time we were both traveling. And that was it. Like, once I had left and I wasn't around and she couldn't call me when she needed something, she didn't have any reason to call me anymore.
Yeah.
And that was when I started to realize, like, the reality of things started to come out, because I would have never seen it had I stayed close.
Yeah.
I started my mom work.
Yeah.
I was, like, deep in working on my mother wound at that time.
And so, in my own little bubble of the world, and being able to, like, you know, I'm not in your family, but I've been, you know, around your family so much, and I've had friendships with each of your family members and stuff. From the onset of all of this, it started to make sense, where it was like, okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying. Like, with your mom, you know, we always talked about things with your dad and how you try to treat your siblings properly and all of that. And for me, I couldn't imagine looking back, and had we just gone the typical divorce route of, like, okay, 2020, you were like, yeah, like, I don't want to be with you. It's like, okay, well, peace out, and we'll just go our separate ways. See you in court and figure out how things go, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that life, none of these things would have happened. And it's, you know, it's amazing to me to, like, see all of the universal ties that come together when you're talking about your friend Dulce, and, like, the fact that she was, you know, specifically called to do, you know, sexual abuse and molestation, You know, all of these intricate things that happen, they happen for a reason. They happen because they're trying to, you know, teach you something. And for me, what I've seen is like, when you were moving through these steps, it was like if I had just fucked off and went to go do my own thing, there would be, you probably would have eventually come to these things, but I wouldn't be there to be there with you, you know, to be there through that with you.
Well, you were the only family that I had anymore.
Yeah.
Once we moved to Texas, and we really kind of, the first year there, we really like began to settle into our own lives and didn't, I mean, there was no issue, you know, we just were figuring out our own ways and doing our own things. And beyond the kids, we didn't really talk very much or have much to do with each other. And then when I left my job and I came home, I remember distinctly going, okay, because all of the kids were in school, and so I had all of this time. I went from having absolutely no free time in my life to even think, to having all of this free time going, what the hell am I supposed to do with myself? And at first, I had to learn how to give myself grace with resting, because I was so tired. All I wanted to do was sleep. And the voice in my head at first was going, you're not being productive, you're this, you're that, like all of the things that we tell ourselves, like you should be doing this, you should be finding another job, you should be, and I'm like, what is the point of any of that? Why would I leave the last job? Why would I, you know, I'm in this moment for a reason, so I'm just going to allow myself to rest. And so I learned how to be graceful with myself. And, you know, this comes where I'm a year into figuring out how to navigate through healing my mother wound, and at the same time trying to learn how to love myself, because I always thought that I loved myself, but just the way that life kept going, I'm like, you know, I keep hitting these roadblocks, and I keep just, it was like I just kept running into a brick wall, and I'm like, okay, well, clearly there is something. I am creating these experiences for myself. I don't like to use the word manifest, but I am manifesting the resistance and the conflict in my life. Why am I doing this? Like, where is this coming from? And so then I was like, maybe I don't actually love myself. So then I was like, what does that mean? How do you love yourself? What does it actually mean for an individual to love themselves? And so I had been doing, that was like my internal work that I was working on when I had the time and space in my life. And then when I left my job, the kids were at school, I suddenly had an abundance of free time. I was like, you know, who knows if or when I will ever find myself in a moment in life like this again, where I have so much space for myself. And so that was when I really just like fell face first into the deep end of, that's what I called it, free fall. That was where I went into free fall of just being like, whatever it is that I'm supposed to learn from this experience, I just fully surrendered to it. And I had already experienced so many times throughout life, but and then especially in the last several years, I had experienced just trusting myself and then seeing the reason why I should trust myself. Where I made a decision that I couldn't explain to you or anyone else or myself, but I knew it was the right thing to do, and then it turned out to be the right thing to do. And so in this moment, I was like, I trust myself enough to just lean in. And that was what I did. And that's how I ended up going, I need to go around the world. And I didn't know why when I decided to take that trip. I had no idea why or what I was going to do, but I knew for a fact that on the other side of it, I knew I was going to be a different person when I came home. I just had no idea what the experience was going to be that changed me. And I never, ever in a million years could have anticipated that it was the one that I had. I never would have seen that coming. And so I basically then shed the layers of relationships with all of my immediate family members. I don't have very much extended family, and so it really was like, all right, well, it's you and me now. By way of the fact that we share kids, you're stuck with me. And I know I've told you this, but I cannot imagine how I would have possibly gotten through the last year without your support, and that's one of the things that I get so frustrated when people are like, why are you still like, why not just go your own way? It's like, dude, my own way would have been so much more difficult without you, because I had no one else to support me, to talk to me, to like say, you've got this, like, just keep going, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I was never, so all of that happened. I processed everything as best as I could throughout the rest of my travels. I had an amazing, incredible experience. I came home, and I got home, and everything that I had managed to compartmentalize just came down on me like a monsoon. And so it was the end of July when I got home, and I spent the next couple of months just trying to, I felt like a new little baby giraffe, and my legs were all wobbly, and I didn't know how to exist in the world. And I remember thinking, like, I want to call my mom, because this is where you would call your mom.
Yeah.
And there were so many times that, like, days on end, that all I could do was just make it to the shower, and I just laid in the shower and just sobbed. And everything just kept coming out. And I think I even said to you at one point, I'm like, when is it going to stop?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You said that to me multiple times.
And I knew that I had tapped this vein inside of me where all of the suppressed emotions, all of the fear, all of the things that I had not experienced were coming out. And it was so difficult for me, because I am not somebody who's ever felt fear. I've never been afraid. I mean, beyond heights, that's the one thing. Like, my body feels fear when it comes to heights, but I've never felt fear about anything. And all of the sudden, it was like everything in the world was terrifying to me.
Yeah.
I didn't leave the house. I didn't want to go to the grocery store. I felt like everyone and everything was out to get me. And it was like, in my mind, I knew that that's so irrational. But my body just felt so on edge, and everything was terrifying. And all I wanted to do was hide from it all, and I did. And it was like, God bless those kids. Like, I couldn't even let them go out with their friends, because I was terrified of the world and of everything. And it finally culminated after, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And I mean, there were times where, like, I packed up and drove down to Cammie's to get out of the city, because I was like, there's something horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something horrible. And in my reasonable mind, it's like, dude, chill. You're just releasing things that you should have felt decades ago.
Yeah.
But the conundrum of that is, you have to feel it. You can't not feel it. And when you feel it, your brain wants to assign a reason in your present reality to why you're feeling these things. And to be feeling these deep, old, infected wounds that had just been festering for decades was like, I was never at any point suicidal. I had my wits about me. I knew what I was going through. But then the reality of actually going through it was a totally different experience. So it was like I was in two places.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make sense of living in two realities at the same time. And I have such a sensitive place for people who are not able to battle and overcome that depression, because I get it. I feel it. And I remember feeling like, I'd already spent a lifetime not really caring whether or not I lived or died. And then I was in the thick of every single thing that I should have felt throughout my entire life. I was feeling it all at once. And the escape, like, I get it. Yeah. I get how people get to the point where you just can't exist inside of your body anymore, because the overwhelm, and yes, there's a huge aspect, like it is a mental health thing, but it's also a physical thing, because everything that your mind experiences, your body experiences. And for me, I just wanted to crawl out of my skin, because I didn't have the energy to continue processing all of those emotions and all of that energy that came through me. And then there was the day where I called you and I just lost it, because as all of this is happening, I'm still trying to take care of the kids. And it was in September when you left, and for the first time, I remember looking at you and going, I don't want you to leave. Like, I don't want to be alone. I can't be alone right now. And you had to go back to work. And so I was just like, all right, I just have to get through 28 days of like taking care of everybody by myself. And so I'm just going to do everything I can to just not go anywhere. And I think that was like right about the time that Silas and Scarlett had both decided to homeschool. So you had already pulled them out, and we were homeschooling them. And then Gavin, I was just stressed all the time. And it doesn't help that the world is like imploding at the same time. And there's constantly just horrible things in the news. And even if I don't watch the news, it's just everywhere around you. And so he'd go to school and I'm like terrified, right? Because my brain is like, find a reason to be feeling all this fear.
Yeah.
And so it just got to such a point of overwhelm. And there was this one day, I don't remember what it was, but he was being a teenager and he was giving me attitude, and I just couldn't, because again, my reasonable mind was like, they don't understand this. Like, they cannot even begin to conceptualize any of this.
Yeah.
And I got it, but the energy of his teenage angst and attitude and the way he was treating me, I had no space for it. And I remember calling you and I just lost it, and I just cried, and I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't be here. I can't be in my body. I can't be in my mind. Like, I don't know how to continue to exist, and I have no one. And I just wanted to call my mom, and my mom was the biggest problem. And so then you left work. And I didn't even know that y'all were at the dock.
Yeah.
I thought you were offshore. And so you left work and you're like, I've never been worried about you, and I'm really worried about you, and I'm really worried about the kids, so I'm coming home right now. And so you got on the road and came back, and I think I slept for like 2 weeks after that.
Yeah.
I don't really remember much after that, because I was just like, I'm out, I'm done. I have to go like disintegrate from everything that I am and see if I can come back and still be human again.
Yeah.
And so then after that, I spent the next couple months just trying to figure out how to exist in a world where I didn't have anyone anymore besides you and the kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Here we are.
So when I came home, there was a lot of shedding going on, because when I got home, there was, things with your father and how, his insecurities started coming out about how he didn't show up for you, and we had a lot of arguments and just heated discussions with family members of yours. And at that time, I think, is when from the perspective that I held, I had done enough work that I knew that you just needed me to be there for you and to just show up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my lesson in all of this, is to learn how to show up for people when they need it, and
just hold space and not fix it.
Yeah, I don't have to fix it. The only way you will ever fix it is to just hold space, and you don't have to worry about the outcome, because it's not up to you. It's up to that person. But you can be the grounding rod. They can grab onto you and they can discharge all of that terrible, negative, funky energy. And there was a lot of emotions on my side, just because, despite everything, despite us, we're not together, we're divorced, I have so much love for you, and to learn about these things, it angered me to no end. And, not just with the sexual abuse, but things with your family. And that was a really tough time that I went through, just trying to process and then be there for you, because that was my end of it. It was learning how to, just work through your own emotions, and everything's going to be okay.
I think I remember hearing you say to my dad, is like, we're not even together and I'm the only one that's been here for her.
Yeah, exactly. And, a couple other points that were made is, I started to see the full-on dysfunction of your family as, like, I had always felt it. I'd always felt the energy, but I was never super in tune with it. And then as time went on, I started seeing, okay, this is fucked up. Oh, that's fucked up,
Mm-hmm.
And what really hit me, and it was a thought that came forth as I was arguing with him. And, I was vehement. I was screaming at him, and I told him, I said, if my daughter had called me and said any of this had happened to her, I would have been in fucking Bali. Everything would have been dropped, and I would have been there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is that, in that moment, what you needed was someone to be there. And that's, I think the, something that I'm feeling about this entire, almost 2-hour portion of this podcast is the separation of self. When this is not just a separation from each other. We've also separated ourselves. You and I are no longer the people we were, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You change and you evolve and you grow and you learn, and we do that. We have to do that as a society as well, and we can't just keep holding on to these same platitudes of you're not together anymore, just go your own way. Like, we have to evolve into something better. And I think the amount of information that was just given from you is going to be very helpful for everyone to understand, what it is that keeps us together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think every relationship has something similar to that, maybe not to that level of, trauma, but there's, everyone has, if you've been married 5, 10, 15 years, you have a lot of interaction and experience and, you know, shared time together. And so, I thank you for sharing all that, because I know that's got to be tough. And, you know, I've always thought the world of you. You're a very strong individual. I've always admired your ability to, you know, hold yourself accountable, and your ability to, you know, work through really tough things. And the, you know, it's taught me a lot in life. And when I did finally, you know, show up in that way, it was like the dawn of a new age. And for me, it's, you know, this trip in of itself is it's a culmination of all of that, because it's showing me that, you know, realistically, I like being here, but I never would have had to have come here, you know? I never would have had to have traveled. I'm just one of those people where I'm like, I'm okay just doing this thing over here. But on the other hand, I'm so glad that I'm here. It's tested me in ways, I mean, holy shit, the baggage situation going through the train station, the foreign tongues, I mean, I am so on edge here because I don't know anyone here. I'm not comfortable at all, you know? And it's like, we get so in our comfort zone, and I think this right here is what we do to show people it's okay to step outside of that comfort zone. It's okay to, you know, face the hard things, and that right there is,
well, not just it's okay, but it's important. And that's why I wanted to take a trip with you and the kids, because I could have said, hey, I'm gonna go travel by myself again for a little bit. But I wanted to take you and the kids to experience this, because I understand. And it's earlier last year, I guess in the spring, those kids, sorry if you can hear our children, they're doing their best. We've got castle fever stuck inside with the rain today, but at least they're hanging out.
Yeah.
Having fun, not fighting. But so this was before I even went to Bali. This was sort of the little mantra, I guess, that gave me the courage to take that trip. Was I was just talking to God one night, and just like, what, like, something's gotta give. Like, I feel like I'm stuck on this hamster wheel, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to get off, and just give me something. And immediately, as soon as I said that, I heard, don't get comfortable. And I realized that so much of the things that I had desired in my life, even getting married, like marrying you was, aside from like the kids and all of that stuff, just on an individual instinctual level, it's like, okay, I'll be okay. There's somebody to take care of me if I can't take care of me, you know. And as a woman, that's, we are designed to have a man to support us through life and provide, not just like financially, but provide certain things that we cannot provide for ourselves, and that's the sense of security. And so for me, getting married to you, part of that was finding a sense of security that I never had.
Yeah.
You know, there was no security I was never that girl that was like run to my daddy for help or anything, which is one of the reasons why it was so difficult, because when you left, and I told you, I was like, I do not want to be alone. I remember I called him and you called him separately after you left. And I told him, I was like, I'm just having a really hard time right now, and I really don't want to be alone. And he was on his way to my grandmother's. They live in different states. And he's like, I'm on my way there right now. I've got to go help her with some things. And I said, okay. And I just kind of figured I'd hear from him when he was done with that part. And I never heard from him. And then I guess you must have called him when you got off the ship.
Yeah.
And then he called me, and he was like, I just talked to Austin, what's going on? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, it sounds like you're having a hard time. Do you want me to come? And I said, no. I asked you to come 3 weeks ago. Like, Austin's on his way. What do I need you for now?
Yeah.
And that really, like, cut him deep because he hung up on me. And then we've had one conversation since then, and it was not a pleasant one, and I was real nasty to him, and I told him everything he was.
Yeah. Yeah, that ensued the heated discussions and arguments, and that was the point that I made to him is, when you came forth with the information about being sexually abused, that was in the summertime, and now we're in the fall. And, like I said, if this was something that had happened to my daughter, and no matter what age, I don't care if I'm 90, I'm hobbling my way with my cane to go see her.
He didn't even show up when I got back to the States.
That's what I'm saying. So it's an important detail to uncover of all this, because it shows that, the level of lack of care that has been placed for you and your family, and that it's been tough for me to see all of this transpire when I come from a family that they would show up, and I remember actually you said some hard things to me, and I've had to just understand what you're going through and be okay with it, and learn to not personalize anything that you're saying, because you are. I mean, I can't imagine. I cannot. That isn't what happened to me in this life. But I do know that I'm supposed to be here for you through it all. And when you said things, like I've said things about, like my mom or whatever, and you're like, well, it must be fucking nice to have a mom that shows up for you. And it's like,
I say that in jest, though.
No, well, there was one time that you said it, and you were actually, like, we were having a conversation, you were, like, actually upset, and I just bit my tongue, and I said, yeah, you know what, I get it. Like, you're upset, you just need to lash out, and that's the thing, is, like, learning not to personalize things has helped me tremendously in my life with you, our kids, everyone around me.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, with all that being said, we have kind of delved into the deep, part of the, trauma that you went through, and it's been a lot. It's been a lot for a year and a half. And
trust me, I'm ready to move on.
And that's, from my end, I had to stay rooted in knowing that this is all part of what was meant to pass. And
So, with all of that being said, the experience for me was what it was, and for you was what it was, and it gave us the opportunity to show up for one another in such a new way, because it was not a conflict between us that we had to work through. It was just being family, like being supportive, and honestly, like, for you, because for me, I was just trying to continue to function.
Yeah.
But in all of that, it forced me to really, like, humanize myself for the kids, because I had always worked really hard to protect them from my traumas. And up until recently, they've really been too young to really need to know any of it. And I have always been intentional to not be one of those parents that exposes my kids to more than what they're capable of understanding or comprehending or need to know too soon. But through this experience, there was no holding back.
Yeah.
There was no... I had to explain some things to them, because I know that my behaviors were erratic, and, like, the fact that I couldn't leave the house, I couldn't do certain things. I went from being gone all the time, super busy social life, like, just so out there, to then, if I could have climbed in the attic and sealed myself off, I would have, you know.
Well, I even recall encouraging you to talk to them.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, and I was like, maybe you just need to tell them some of it, not all of it, but some.
Yeah.
You know, because that's a really interesting point you made about humanizing yourself, because you were kind of always like, you protected them, and that's what a mom should do, you know. But now they're at that age where they are capable of understanding a certain level, and they deserved an explanation, you know.
Yeah, and it was hard for me to be the reason that they would have thought anything negatively of my mom or anything, because I didn't want that. Like, I didn't want that view for them, but I also had to accept that she clearly had no interest in preserving any relationship with either me or them. And so that was yet another thing where I had to let down that it's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I told the boys a little bit more and more in depth than I did Scarlett, just because they understand differently, and a little older, and she's a different type of sensitive being, you know.
And her relationship with your mom was different as well.
She was really close with my mom, and she spent a lot of time with her when we lived near her, which is another thing that's just like, thank God we left, because she would have had Scarlett over there around him all the time.
Yep.
And her inability to believe the truth of who he is exposed her own children to him. And then, I mean, she exposed our children to him as well. And thankfully it was sporadically and seldomly. But if we lived so closely and he was there, she would have just served my kids up on a platter.
Yeah.
And that's also hard, because it's like, it's not from, I don't believe it's from an intentional place, but I think that her refusal to acknowledge the truth, it's the ignorance. She chooses to be ignorant at the expense of whoever he will victimize next.
Yeah.
And so I'm just glad that we got away from it, but all of this really gave me the opportunity to help the kids see in real time the process of experiencing and processing and purging trauma and healing. And I was able to sit with them and sort of explain things, and to some degree, you know, that they were capable of understanding. And really to see us show up, like for you to show up for me in the way that you did, I think is such an incredible lesson for them, because I think one of the biggest beneficial lessons from the way that we have done things is being outside of a marriage, yet still choosing to be family, is there's not any benefit for us. It's not from, nothing that we do for one another comes from that selfish or entitled space anymore.
Yeah.
It is purely just, you show up for me because you want the best for me, because at the end of the day, I'm the mother of your children.
Yeah.
And the better I am, the better they will be.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt, you know, years ago when we started going through the separation, that I would do whatever I had to do and show up for you and hold your hand if I needed, or be like, have a hard boundary if I needed, because you being your best self means that you'll be the best father to my children that you can be.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. And so I think they've been able to see us navigate those things from a more selfless space, because we don't personally have much of anything to gain from this. Although, I mean, I say that, but we have gained so much. But it comes from the perspective of it's not for me, it's for them.
Yeah.
But in the process of living that, we do receive so much.
Exactly.
Because there's just, I cannot imagine how I would have gotten through the last year without you. Like, there's just, I mean, I would have, I had to, but it wouldn't have been in my best good. Like, it wouldn't have been so impactful. It wouldn't have been in a way that allowed me the space that that everyone looks at and is like, why are you doing that? Like,
yeah.
Why are you doing that? I'm doing this so that she can heal, she can grow. You're the only person on this planet that understands me to the depth that you do, just because you've spent the last 20 years of your life with me.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And so it's like, how do you just discard that type of relationship and that depth of understanding from another person? Because anybody who's in their 30s or beyond knows that outside of your family, if you even have that, there's so few people who have watched you go through life for that much time, who have been a part of your life for that long. And so, yeah, we decided that we don't want to be married, but that doesn't mean that we just trashed the relationship with someone. I mean, I remember watching you go through your most difficult life experiences in high school. No one else that's present in your life today was there for that.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
No one that I can become friends with or get into a relationship with will ever be able to understand where I come from the way that you do, because they'll never live it with me the way you did. I may never see my mom again, which means anyone's understanding of that experience will be theoretical. And we then get to show up as help other people in our lives really see that.
Yeah.
You know? So, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. There's a level of connection and understanding, and when you first start coming into a place of separation, whether it be a relationship, a friendship, or a part of yourself, it's like change. It's like me being here in Germany. It's very difficult at first. And then little by little you find your way to
acclimate,
weasel back into your comfort zone. Yeah, you find your acclimation. And we have constantly tested each other as well. Not only just are we showing up for each other, but we're testing each other. And we kind of put each other up against the ropes, like, hey, you've got to face this or it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. And so, you can't be certain of what the other person's going to do. You just have to lean into that faith and trust it. And that's been my ultimate takeaway from all of this is I can express my emotions. I can be angry. I can be sad. I can be whatever. I can be happy. Whatever my emotions are, I can be all of those things. But I just have to trust. That's the ultimate thing, and that's faith, right? That's God, is trusting that you're going to work through this and you're going to be okay. And I trust it. And You know, there was times when, you know, like when you called me, and even before that, there was times when I was like, you know, you'd be calling me and you're like, I have to leave the city. And I'm just like, you wanted to be in the city. It's like, I just have to trust, because I don't know what's going on in your mind. I don't know everything that's happening, but I've got a good sense of it because I have spent so long, you know, being there with you. So I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of important distinctions going through all of this that it really, really always goes back to communicating with that person. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably going to be a very often repeated
Well, it
mantra.
needs to be, because communication is that's the thing that we lacked inside of our marriage. I tried to communicate, but I couldn't figure out how to speak to you. And you didn't really communicate, and you didn't really listen. And so then I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm not going to get anywhere. I think I just accepted defeat in that way. And that's what you were like, wait, no, like I'll pay attention now.
Yeah.
And since we have figured out how to communicate with each other, it has been really simple
Yeah.
to navigate these things. And ultimately, like, we made a commitment to one another to see each other through this life. And we're still honoring that commitment. We're just doing it in the way that we choose to do it.
Yeah.
We're doing it from the place that is most genuine and most authentic to us as individuals. And it's not from the pressure of the church or, you know, what marriage means and da-da-da. Like, that we don't even adhere to a religious structure. So that part is completely irrelevant. And then the legal aspect is just a legal contract.
Yeah.
That's like a business agreement. So as far as what our relationship is, we get to decide that, and we have given ourselves permission to decide that.
Yeah.
We have given ourselves permission to take away the construct of everything else, of what does a family look like, what is marriage, what is relationship, and all of that, and what is family, because that's where we're like, at the end of the day, I don't want to be in a relationship with you, but you're my family.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And we both honor the commitment that we made to our family. So, yeah, I think that about sums it up. That was a
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That was a lot. That was a good one, though. I think two-parter, a lot of information, a lot of, you know, uncovering some wounds, and that's tough. I'm sure that's tough to do on camera, and I think I think that there's going to be so many people out there that benefit just way beyond, you know, oh, we're getting divorced. This is turning into something that's, you know, diving into so many different aspects of life and growth and healing. So I'm excited.
Well,
looking forward
I
to
think
more.
that there are so many people who are looking to navigate, because if you think even just 10 years ago, much less 15 or 20 years ago, so many of our peers entered into relationships with a perception and a perspective that was given to them.
Yeah.
It was given to them either from family or religion or society, whatever, and entered into a relationship and a contractual agreement under circumstances that they didn't necessarily choose. They didn't negotiate their contract. And in the last couple of decades, particularly I would say in the last 5-10 years, we're seeing so many people who are pulling away from those traditional models and who are just going, it doesn't work. And really, the way that the world is moving dictates that it doesn't work. We no longer have one income households where the guy has the room to say, you better have dinner on the table at 6 when I get home because I'm at work too. Yeah. You know, and the world that created those constructs is rapidly dissipating into the past.
Yeah.
And as we're moving into this future of an entirely new way of living, new way of being, people are looking for the permission to go their own way.
Yeah.
And so as much as I really truly do not enjoy exposing all of my most tender parts, I also recognize that I have been put in a position, or I've chosen to come into this life and be in a position where I have experienced an abundance of difficulty and beyond. And I've allowed myself to navigate and overcome it in my own way. And that's something that I can say is I have always done things my way, which has not always been well received, and I think is the foundation of a lot of the conflict between my mom and I. Is she very, very much does exactly what the rules are and precisely how she's expected to do and to be, and she will not deviate from that. And I'm like, fuck that. and it just inflames so many aspects of herself, where I really wish that she would have allowed herself at any point in life to make her own rules. But thankfully, so many people are starting to give themselves the permission to dip their toes into this realm of living for yourself and living by your own rules. And in that vein is why I feel like I do have a sense of responsibility to share, only because I know that people pay attention and I know that people listen, even if I don't want to, even if I would prefer to be hiding in the bell tower. And so, yeah, it's not super fun, but the last few years of my navigating through my social media presence have really, I think, primed me for the ability to share about everything that has transpired in recent years, because an earlier version of myself would not have been able to do that.
Yeah. And honestly, same here. I'm not very much the person to come on camera and just talk for a long time. I'm the type of person that I would rather just be like building something or like working on something. That's just very much who I am.
Frivolous nonsense projects that make no sense.
Nonsense projects that turn out awesome. So this is both, I think, leaning into discomfort zones for both of us, and hopefully people will...
Welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening and following along. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that maybe, hopefully, there's been some little spark for you to help kind of light the way of whatever path it is you're navigating. And we've definitely felt the call over the last few years to share, because we realize the uniqueness of how we've chosen to do things, and we have acknowledged that people are looking for the ability to do that themselves. And so if we can hand over just a little flame to help ignite your own journey, then that's what we're here for. So thank you very much for being here and for listening. And if you have any questions, if there's anything that you maybe we glossed over, because I think we might tend to jump tracks a little bit in conversation. Just leave some comments and we will be sure to get on that. So anyway, have a wonderful day wherever in the world you are, and thanks for supporting us and being here and all that jazz. Okay, bye.
Guten Tag.